This is video 8.4, the slope of a line. Let's start by putting slope into perspective. What do we mean by slope? Well, slope is when you calculate the rise over the run. So if we look at this hill and we measure here the rise of our hill, which you can see here is 4 centimeters. So let's put 4 centimeters here. And we also measure the run of our hill, which is right here, which is a 7. So if I was to show the slope of this hill, I would say that it was 4/7 slope. So you'll notice that I wrote it as the rise of the hill over the run of the hill. So this here is what I'm calling the run, and this here is what I'm calling the rise. Now let's transfer that to a graph. Now if I look at this graph, rise would correlate with my change in my y-axis, and 1 would correlate to my change in my x coordinates. So let's look at my first graph here. If I look at this line, my rise is 1 and my run is 1. So my slope would be 1/1, or a slope of 1. Now you'll also notice that rocket and arrow are walking up the line in the positive direction of the x-axis, right? And we also notice that our slope is a positive slope. For this part, let's look at the second coordinate plane. In this one, I'm going to take 2 points, one here and one here, and I'm going to calculate the slope. So this point is an x-coordinate of 0 and a y-coordinate of 6. And this point here gives me an x-coordinate of 8 and a y-coordinate of 1. And actually, let's make this a different color. And actually that's 8 and 2, because this is counting by 2's. So I have the point 8, 2 and the point 0, 6. Alright? Now I want to know what my rise over my run is. Right? To calculate that, I can take my x coordinates and subtract them. And I can take my y coordinates and subtract them. So let's try that. So let's call this x1 and this x2. So for my first one, I'm going to take 0 minus 8 and 6 minus 2. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find the difference between my y coordinates here and the difference between my x coordinates here. And that should give me my rise over my run. So if I subtract this out, 6 minus 2 is 4. And 0 minus 8 would give me a negative 8 if I DPS that. All right, if I simplify this, this would give me a slope of negative 1/2. Now let's look at that. If I go from each point on my line, let's say we start here, I'm going to go down because it's a negative 1, 1, and over 2 to hit the next point on my line. Let's try that again. Down 1, over 2. So my slope is negative 1/2. It's a negative slope, and you'll also notice that rocket and arrow are walking up the line in the negative direction of the x-axis. So if I compared these two lines, this would be considered a positive slope, and this would be considered a negative slope. This one has a slope of negative 1/2, and this one has a positive slope of 1. Okay, and actually we can think of it as 1 over 1. So to get from one point on my line to another, I have to go by ones. Now let's look at these two lines. These two are special lines. Let's find 2 points on our line here. Let's say this one and this one. And again, we're going to calculate the slope. So this would be 0.22 right here. And this one would be 0.42. If we use this, we should be able to figure out that 2 minus 2 over 2 minus 4 would give us the slope of this line. What does that give us? That gives us 0 over negative 2. Right? So, does that make sense? Yes, to get to every point on my line, I don't go up or down at all. That's the 0. I don't rise, but I can go 2 in a negative 2 direction to get to the next point. So I would go here, here, here. Right? Now, what is the slope of my line? How would I write this as an answer? Well, let's think about that. What times negative 2 gives us 0? Well, that would be 0. So my slope is considered a 0 slope. And you notice there's no slope to my line at all. It's just 0. Okay, so this is a special kind of line. Now here's another example of a line. Let's look at 2 points on this line. Okay, let's put one here and another one here. So what are these two coordinates? Well, this one's 6, 6. And this one is 6, 2. So those are my two coordinates. Let's use the same rule. We're going to find the difference between my y coordinates. So 6 minus 2 over the difference of my x coordinates, 6 minus 6. Right? This will give me 4 over 0. Now what times 0 gives me 4? Well, there is no solution to this. So this is what we call an undefined slope. So we call this slope undefined. And you'll notice poor Rocket has nothing to hang on to, so he just infinitely falls. There's no place for him to stand. This is an undefined slope. An undefined slope looks like this. And a slope of 0 would look like this. Now let's apply what we've learned. Tell whether the slope of the line is positive, negative, 0, or undefined, and then find the slope. Well, notice that my line is going up in a positive direction. So I'm going to assume that it's positive, but let's figure it out. Okay? So we have 2 points. We have point 0, 12, and we have point negative 1, or negative 4, negative 4. Alright? So now if I take my y coordinates and find the difference, I get 12 minus a negative 4. If I take my x coordinates and subtract them, I get 0 minus a negative 4. Alright, let's calculate that out. 12 minus a negative 4, if I add the opposite, that gives me 16. If I add the opposite here, it gives me 4. Alright, I'm going to simplify this so it would be 4. So I guessed it was positive, and I ended up with a positive slope. So the slope of this line is 4. Alright, find the coordinates of 2 points on the line with the given equation. Then use the points to find the slope of a line. Alright, so first of all, I need to find 2 points. So let's use our x and y chart, and let's substitute 1 and 0 for x to find 2 points that work on this line. So the first time I'm going to use 1. So y equals negative 3 times 1 plus 11. That gives me y equals negative 3 plus 11, or y equals 8. So one of my points is 1, 8. Now let's find another point. Now I'm going to substitute 0 for x. So y equals negative 3 times 0 plus 11. Well, notice here that this becomes 0. So I end up with y equals 11. So when x is 0, y is this. So y equals 11. So now I have my second point, 0, 11. Now I should be able to calculate slope. So I'm going to find the difference between my x coordinates, 8 minus 11, over my distance between my x coordinates, 1 minus 0. Alright, I'm going to DPS this. Alright, so that's going to give me a negative 3. If I subtract this, it's going to give me a 1. So my slope for this line is negative 3. So that's how you find it when just given an equation. Alright, what if I want to find the slope of a line using 2 points? Alright, well, I'm going to find the difference between my y coordinates. So I'm going to take 3 minus 19, and then I'm going to find the difference between my x coordinates, 6 minus 14. Alright, this is going to give me negative 16 over negative 8. Now notice both of these are negative. Negative divided by a negative makes a positive, so I actually have a positive 16 over 8, or simplified, my slope is 2. So the slope of a line that passes through these 2 given points would be 2. Let's do one more. Right, again I'm going to find the difference between my y coordinates. So negative 17 minus negative 12 over the difference between my x coordinates, negative 6 minus a negative 22. Alright, let's DPS these. Okay, if I subtract this out, I get a negative 5 over 16, and that would be my slope. It's not simplifiable, and I've got, for this one, a negative slope. Now it's your turn to try some of these other problems in your video packet, and this is the end of the video on the slope of a line.